industry. So he's our speaker for today's session, our first session. So without wasting much time, let's show James some love as he takes over to just give us something small on Google Cloud. Hi, James. Let's give James some warm welcome and some reactions.
Hey, Shadrach.
Hi, James. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I've joined a bit late. I was running late from another meeting.
Okay,
I
that's
hope you
fine.
can be able to hear me.
Yes, please, we can hear you.
Fantastic.
All right.
It's great to see so many people in the group today. Uh, Hi to you all. And thank you to Sadiq for inviting me. So I was invited to give you a quick overview of Google Cloud Platform and what you can do with it, and how you can easily get started to start building your solution with it. Um, I was hoping over more of a Q&A session, but before we get there, I can give you a quick rundown of Google Cloud Platform, and then from there I can take uh, any questions that you might have. Google Cloud Platform is a platform on Google Cloud. Is a platform that you can use to be able to build and run your application or your solution. And it comes with many offerings that you can be able to take advantage of. It has services for deploying and hosting your application. It has services for hosting your databases. It has services for networking, services for big data storage, etc. Now, if you want to get started easily to just build your solution and have it running in the cloud, there are services you can get started with. And an easy one to get started with is Google App Engine, which is a platform as a service. And what Google App Engine requires you to know is just your favorite programming language. It could be Java, it could be Python, it could be PHP, Go, the language that you choose to build your solution. And Google App Engine is what we call a platform as a service, which means you don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure that is running your application. All you need to know is the language that you're using, design your solution, implement it, and Google App Engine has an easy way to make it deployed. And also, when you deploy to App Engine, you don't have to worry about scalability. And when I joined, I found you are talking about Google Cloud credits. You can be able to use your cloud credits to host your solution on App Engine. And if your application gets a lot of traffic, you don't have to worry about the application running out of servers or getting slow, because App Engine is built to scale. And there are many services out there that use App Engine. For example, you might have heard of Khan Academy. Uh, they built the whole platform on App Engine. So it's a very good, easy to get started and scalable solution. Now, some people, they like to go beyond App Engine and they want to add more customization to the application. They want to maybe customize the server that the application is running on, install some additional third-party libraries. They want to probably containerize that application. If you want to do that, there's a service called Cloud Run that you can also use. Cloud Run requires you to have a bit of knowledge of something called Docker, which is a platform for packaging your application in Linux containers. If you're able to use Docker, if you know how to use Docker, you can package your application in a Docker image and then deploy it as a container runtime on Cloud Run. Now you can go beyond that and look at compute engine, where now you have full access to the entire underlying virtual machine. If you want to deploy your application on a virtual machine that is using Ubuntu, you need to use an Nginx web server, stuff like that, you can have a look at um, compute engine. If you still want to use containers, but you need more control of the underlying platform, you can go build Cloud Run and use something like Google Kubernetes engine. Kubernetes engine now requires you to have a bit of knowledge of how Kubernetes works. And Kubernetes is a platform for orchestrating containerized applications. There's also something we call cloud functions, which is also a way of, we call them serverless application, where there's a way you can package your application and deploy it to a cloud function. And then you only pay for when your application runs. So cloud functions are only charged when there's a running runtime of your application. You don't get charged when your application is not running. And all these are available with the cloud credits in the free tier. Now, your application will obviously need a database, most likely it will. And Google Cloud Platform has services for you to be able to store your data. You can use if you want to use a database like MySQL, Postgres, we have database as a service available on Google Cloud SQL. If you want to use NoSQL databases, something like MongoDB, you can be able to access it, available as a service. You might also want to be able to store binary data, such as images, files, video. You can take advantage of Google Cloud Storage, which also scales seamlessly. You don't have to worry about running out of storage. You just need to generate the data that you need. And cloud storage is very easy to provision and connect to your application, whether your application is on App Engine or Cloud Run or GKE. You can be able to store any amount of binary data on Google Cloud Storage. If you want to store structured data, go for Google Cloud SQL, choose your database, MariaDB, MySQL, Postgres, they are all available for you to be able to take advantage of. For NoSQL databases, there are things like Google Cloud Data Store. If you're into that area, you can take advantage of that. You can also, if you're building mobile applications, you can also look into Firebase. Firebase is also part of Google Cloud Platform. And it also comes with a host of solution to make it easy for you to build your mobile application. For example, it has services for deploying your application, testing your application, monitoring your application. It also has integrations with notifications. Firebase cloud messaging is used widely. If you want to be able to send notifications to your users, a lot of people are using Firebase cloud messaging. If you want to be able to test your application in so many devices, there's Firebase Test Lab, Firebase devices, you can be able to do your testing there as well. And also with the cloud credits, you can be able to use Firebase because it is part of Google Cloud Platform. So the other services on Google Cloud now come in when your application is scaling up. When you have big data, you need big data storage services. You need to store a lot of data. You need huge databases. Their services are available as your application grows. But as a beginner, I think if you can just think about the application runtime, where your application will run, look into App Engine or Cloud Run, think about the data storage, where you want to store your data, get the database that you want. If you want to store binary data, like I've said, go look into Google Cloud Storage. And if you're building mobile solution, make sure you check out Fabis. So I'll stop there. That's a brief overview of introduction to cloud platform. And if anyone has a question, they can ask. Back to you, Shadrach.
All right. Thank you, John, so much. James, sorry. Thank you, James, sorry, for the overview for Google Cloud Platform. So we have a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask those ones so that you can answer them. Please, if you have any question, please go to the Q&A session and then type in your question so that we can ask James and you get your answers from James. So please, if you haven't sent in your questions yet, kindly go to the Q&A session and then type in your questions so that we can read out the question for James to answer. So we are going straight to the questions that we have for James today. And the first question we'll be looking at is he spoke about some of them. The first question we'll be looking at, he spoke about something on it. So we are going to be looking at James. The first question is, what is Google Cloud Credit, or what are Google Cloud Credits, and how will it benefit we, the students, while we are participating in our solution challenge? So, what is Google Cloud Credits? We have heard of Cloud Credits, Cloud Credits. Some people don't know whether it's something like a fund or money or something, but what is it? And then how will it benefit us during the solution challenge?
Yeah. So Google Cloud credits are basically um, sort of like points which are equivalent to amount of money you can spend on Google Cloud. And basically what they allow you to do is be able to launch whichever service you want on Google Cloud without having to spend any money. And then your utilization of that service counts towards the Google Cloud credits you have. So let's say, for example, you get 1,000 or let's say $100 of cloud credits, which means you can be able to launch services on Google Cloud with those credits and be able to utilize those services until the utilization or the usage of those services covers the amount of credits you have. Let's say if it was like $100. So let's say if, I wanted to launch a server and a database, and in a month they will cost me $100. If I had $100 worth of Google Cloud credits, I would be able to use those services without paying. So they basically allow you to be able to freely access and use Google Cloud services by utilizing the credits without necessarily having to pay.
Okay, thank you, John, so much, James, for that question. I keep calling you John. Sorry. Thank you, James, for answering that question for us. So we have another question. Guys, please don't forget to type in your question. Type in your question in the Q&A session so that we can go ahead and ask your question for you. So I can go ahead and ask your questions for you. So please use the Q&A session. And if you have the link to the slide, or you can also go ahead and just type in your questions there. Then we can just go ahead and then ask your questions for you. Please, if you have a question, please do that. We are encouraging everyone to ask questions so that we can get answers to them. So, James, our second question is, what Google Cloud services can help students to build apps for Solution Challenge? So, what are some of the Google Cloud services that can help us build apps and submit them for Solution Challenge? Thank you.
Yes, so there are many, like I had mentioned, and again, it's dependent on a number of factors. For example, it's dependent on the kind of application you're building. the kind of technology you want to use, and also the skills that you have. For example, as I mentioned, there is App Engine, which is a platform as a service that can run your application in the cloud. All you need to do is be able to build the application, um, choose your language, build if it's running properly on your machine, follow the instructions for App Engine. You'll be able to easily deploy it. So App Engine is one of them that is very easy to use for a student. If you want to build a mobile-based solution, definitely you have to check out Firebase, as it has a host of services that will make it easy for you to build and distribute your application to your users. And also, after distributing the application, it has services that make it easy for you to monitor the performance of your application and to keep adding features. Now, if you have a bit of expertise on server technology like containerization, and you want to get more hands-on in terms of how to deploy your solution, you can go beyond App Engine and look into something like Cloud Run. It requires you to have knowledge of Docker. You can go beyond that and look at Compute Engine, um, Kubernetes Engine, all that stuff. So it's dependent on your expertise. If you don't have any expertise in server-side technologies and you mostly just conversant with a programming language like Python, just check out App Engine. Design your solution, program it with the language that you want, and check out App Engine, and you will easily have your solution running in the cloud easily. Then, if you want mobile-based solution, check out Firebase. So those are two services that I think are very easy to get started with as a student.
Okay, thank you so much, James. Thank you so much. And then we have another question again. Guys, please don't forget to type in your question in the Q&A session. Thank you. All right. So the third question is, what are the benefits of using Google Cloud, the Google Cloud platform for specific projects? So the specific projects are like mobile apps or web apps, yeah, or website development or web development. So what are the benefits of using the Google Cloud platform specifically for building like your mobile app or building your web app or your website? Yes, please. That's the question.
Okay, that's also a very good question. There are many benefits of using Google Cloud platform. Number one is you will be building your solution based on technology that has been built and tested properly by Google. And Google Cloud Platform is actually technology that Google uses itself. So you can think of the same cloud that runs Google Search, Google Maps, Google Workspace, YouTube, all those services, they run on the same infrastructure that Google Cloud Platform is giving you access to. So you are running on infrastructure that is well tested, that is future proof, that so many other people are using, and you won't have any challenges being able to use it. The other thing is Google Cloud Platform supports open source out of the box. So a lot of people, a lot of you will probably be using open source technologies to build your solution. Um, it's very easy to run open source on Google Cloud. A lot of the projects there are actually open source based. For example, the technology that runs something like Google Cloud Run, Google Kubernetes Engine, uh, these are technologies that are already open sourced, and you will be working besides thousands of other developers who are also developing and building on Google Cloud Platform. Also, Google Cloud Platform is built to be easy to use. You don't have to be an expert in Google, cloud technology. You don't have to be an expert in DevOps, in SRE, in server configuration. You just need to know the solution that you want to build. And you'll find a platform that is very easy to get started with. And then you can grow with it. Like I mentioned, there's a path that you can follow. Get started just worrying about your solution, building your solution. And then as your project grows, you can take advantage of a myriad of other services. Another reason people like cloud platform is it caters for any any kind of application, whether it's an application or a solution that is serving little traffic, solution with one user, two users, millions of users, all these, they can easily be able to run on Google Cloud Platform. So you don't have to be an expertise. You just need to worry about your solution, get started, and you can grow to whichever level you want with cloud platform. Some of the biggest services you can think of in the world, they actually run on Google Cloud Platform. So I would encourage you to just get started. Don't be frustrated. Focus on building your solution, focus on learning, and get growing, and you will be in hands of a good platform.
All right, James, thank you so much for that. We have some couple of questions more. We'll just take them, and I think we'll wrap up. And there's another question. As the question is, how how can I migrate an existing application to Google Cloud? How can I migrate an existing application to Google Cloud? So if I've already developed an application, can I migrate it to Google Cloud? Is that possible? And how do I go by that? Thank you.
Yes, it's easy to migrate any kind of, well, let me say it's possible to migrate any kind of application to Google Cloud. And most of the times when people talk of migration, they're either talking about migrating from another cloud service provider to Google Cloud, like AWS or Azure, or migrating from what we call on-prem or on-premises, where some people host their systems on-prem, or just migrating from any other service. Like you could be hosting your application on a cPanel service somewhere. So the first thing you need to do is to understand your application. What are the requirements that your application needs? Uh, Most likely your application needs to be deployed on a server somewhere. So you need to know, uh, which server does your application need to run on? What kind of operating system do you need? What kind of a web server do you need? So what is the application runtime? And once you determine what is the application runtime, there's a likelihood you already know. Then you can go to Google Cloud and choose from the available compute solutions. Choose one. You can choose one which is a containerized solution like Google Container Engine or Kubernetes Engine, or you can choose one that is a virtual, that gives you a virtual machine like Google Compute Engine. So once you decide what is the application runtime, you just go to cloud and choose from all the services that I've mentioned that are available. Then obviously the second thing is your application most likely persists data somewhere. You probably have a database already. So migrating that also is, you obviously probably know what database your application is using. Is it MySQL? Is it SQL Server? Is it Postgres, Mongo? Then go to Google Cloud Platform and choose the corresponding database for your application. For all these services, you'll find services that help with migration. There are services that help with migration. So if you want to migrate data from on-prem to Cloud SQL, you can find data migration services for that. Then you need to determine the kind of binary data your application is storing, the files, if you're storing images, if you're storing videos, PDFs, whatever, determine how they are stored now, and choose the appropriate, or configure the cloud storage service to be able to store that. So what is your application runtime? You need to know that if you're migrating your application, then choose the corresponding runtime on Google Cloud Platform. Your data storage requirements, what kind of database do you need? You already have one. If you're migrating, go and choose the appropriate one, and then use a data migration tool. They are available on Google Cloud Platform to migrate your data. Then for file storage, configure the file storage service. In this case is Google Cloud Storage, and then migrate your files there. And within no time, it should be easy for you to have your application up and running. If you're migrating from another cloud like AWS or Azure, you just need to find the mirror services, the corresponding service. For example, if you're migrating from AWS and your application was running on what we call uh, Amazon Kubernetes service, you would choose the equivalent of it on Google Cloud, which is Google Kubernetes service. If your application on AWS had a Postgres database, you just choose one and migrate the data. So migrating between clouds sometimes is easier than migrating from on-prem. But the most important thing is to first understand your application, understand your compute requirements, and your data storage requirements. And it should be easy to migrate.
Thank you so much, James. And that was a very wonderful one. We have another question, and he says he wants you to explain in a scenario of building a website for storing patient records at hospitals, and especially for reservations and booking appointments using Google Cloud to do so. So he wants to know if you can explain in a scenario of building a website for storing patients' record at hospitals, especially for reservation and booking appointments using Google Cloud.
So I think that's very application specific. Um, so obviously the first thing is you need to design your application. If you want to be able to do reservations, the first thing is to design that application. How will it work? How will reservations be done? Who are the people doing reservations? Who are the people receiving those reservations? Just design the application first, and then you design the database for storing that data. How will the data be stored? What are the APIs you'll be using for storing, reading the data, listing, and all that. And then once you design the application and you build it, then from there is a matter of choosing the appropriate cloud service to be able to deploy your application. You will obviously need a data storage service, so you choose a database of your choice. And as I mentioned, there are many offerings available based on your needs. If you need an OSQL database, an SQL database, a relational database, all these are available. Then your application runtime, obviously you will develop the application based on the design that you come up with. And you choose whichever language you want. If you want to build it in Java, in Go, it doesn't matter. Just build it with the language that you're comfortable with. And then you now have to decide how to deploy it. As I said, if you are not comfortable with provisioning servers and configurations, you can just go with App Engine. And App Engine, you just build your application in Java or whatever. It has a very easy way of deploying it. App Engine also supports containerization. So if you want to put your application in a Docker container, you can deploy that to App Engine as well. And then when it comes to storing files and stuff like that, we'll provision cloud storage to store that for you. So I may not be able to go into the nitty-gritties of the design of the application, but in terms of the architecture of it, should be very easy. You have your application runtime, you have your data storage, and then on Google Cloud, just choose the appropriate service that you want and deploy it. So that's how I would answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, James. Thank you for that one. And we have another question here. Guys, please, if you have a question, kindly go to the Q&A session and then type in your question. We will ask the question for you. Yes, thank you. So let's do that. If you have any question, please go to the Q&A session and then you can type in your question there. Thank you. All right, James, the next question is when building our apps, are there some things we should consider or take note of if we have plans to host on App Engine? This is because we want to avoid problems when hosting. So, are there some things that we should take note of if we plan to host our apps on App Engine? Because you said App Engine was for scalability. So, are there certain things we need to know when we want to host our app on App Engines so that we can avoid problems when we are hosting later on?
Well, not really, not in particular. I think nowadays App Engine is very flexible. In fact, there's an App Engine service called App Engine Flex. So we used to have App Engine Standard, and now we have App Engine Flex. And with App Engine Flex, I think it supports containerization. You just package your application in a Docker container and deploy it. Now, the previous version of App Engine, I think it's App Engine Standard now, I haven't looked at it recently, was a bit restrictive. For example, you could not be able to install third-party libraries. You would not be able to write into the underlying operating system. It had some restrictions. But I think if you're building a standard web application where you're writing your application, you require compute, you require I/O. App Engine is very flexible these days, and I don't see much to worry about in terms of building your application. All you need to know is it supports a myriad of programming languages. It also supports containerization. So if you build your application, it runs as when you're building it on your machine, and you can be able to maybe containerize it. I don't see much restriction that you're going to face when you use App Engine these days. It's just like any other platform as a service. You can build your application, containerize it, deploy it, connect to whatever third-party service you want, be able to install whichever dependencies that you need in your application. So yeah, I would say I don't see much restriction or much to worry about.
Okay, thank you, thank you, James, for that answer. And then, please, once again, if you have any question, just go to the Q&A session and then type in your question, and then we will get your answers for you. All right. So, James, I have another question, and the question is, what are the best practices for building a scalable and secure application on Google Cloud's platform? So, what are the best practices for building a scalable and secure application on Google Cloud's platform? Thank you.
All right. So best practices for building secure and scalable applications. So when it comes to security, uh, Number one, ensure that you adhere to the set security standard for whichever service that you're using. Each and every service has some documentation where you can go and see what are the security standards that you're supposed to follow. Um, so make sure you go and read and look into that. If you're using Kubernetes engine, there are some things you need to consider to ensure that your application is not exposed to the internet, to ensure that the communication between services within your application are secure. If you're using databases, there are standards that are set on how to ensure that your database is secure. How do you connect to the database? Which ports are exposed? What are the passwords policy that you're supposed to follow? So there's a myriad of ways of making sure that you're not as exposed by default when you're using these services. So the security standards you should follow on something like compute engine may be different with security standards you need to follow on Cloud SQL. So it's always advisable to make sure that as you're using these services, make sure that you look at the documentation properly when it comes to security. Now, when it comes to scalability, I think number one, the design of your application is very important. You need to ensure that your application is built in a way that it's not going to be slowed down by a little spike in traffic. So you need to ensure that the way, for example, you are querying your data, the way you are looping through your data, the way you're displaying that data is built in an efficient way. Now, when you do that at the core of your application, now when you start utilizing services like the containerization services, they come with scalability already built in. For example, if you deploy your application to Cloud Run, the application is able to scale based on traffic requirements. So you can configure it to be able to scale, for example, horizontally if the application requires more CPU or more memory. All these are configurations you can be able to do. For something like App Engine, the scalability is built in. It scales based on resource requirements of your application. If your application needs more CPU, it's going to provision more services or more servers to give you more CPU. But as I mentioned, before you get to needing more CPU for your application, the design of that application is very important to ensure that you're not using resources in a bad way. You're not misusing resources. So design your application first well, make sure it's efficient. And then when it comes to serving a lot of requests, a lot of traffic, you can now scale based on the cloud services that you're using.
Thanks a lot, James. Shadrach, a moment. Yeah, awesome. So I see some questions that are not Google Cloud specific. So I wanted to take those questions. Someone has asked Yanolua, what is exactly the first step of action for those new? If you check the chat, I shared a link where you can register for Solution Challenge and you can find all the details. So if you go to goo.gle/solution challenge, you'll be able to find all the details, submission guidelines, documents, everything that you need. And if you still have a question, please ask the lead of your campus and they'll be able to direct you to that question. Do the credits expire after the challenge? I understand that the credits are valid for 180 days. Yes, I believe the credits are valid for 180 days. So definitely, yeah, so credits are valid for 180 days, and that should be enough during the challenge. After the challenge, like James shared earlier, there are a lot of other places where you can see Google Cloud credits, and also a lot of Google Cloud is really cheap if you're using some little tools, and it shouldn't be that expensive to run. Where can I find the form for registering team members? Tambe Salome will also share that link in the chat, and you'll be able to register team members. Will I still get access to the benefits of Google Cloud? Yeah, so definitely, if you are scaling your startup, even after the challenge, you can continue to host on Google Cloud. I think maybe the next question we should ask James is just a bit about the cost and how students that are building after solution challenge, they can optimize for cost. So over to you, James.
Yeah, so cost optimization is always a big deal when it comes to cloud services. So number one, you need to ensure that you're using just the resources that you need, and that starts by understanding your application, understanding the resource requirements. How much compute, how much CPU does it need to, for example, bootstrap your application and have it running? How much memory does it need? Your application needs 1 gig of memory and 1 CPU. There's no need for you to provision a VM that has, 10 gigs and 10 CPUs or stuff like that. So first, understand your application. How much resources does a unit of your application need for it to run? And so you can ensure that whatever resources you're provisioning are just enough to run that application. So don't provision huge resources. Even with the credits that you have, um, if you go and tomorrow you launch GPUs and stuff like that, so they're just going to run out. So your application should, especially at this time, I don't think you're serving so much traffic. Just go with the minimum available resources when it comes to compute, when it comes to storage. So understand your application, how much resources you need, and just provision those. And at that point, if you understand the unit requirements of your application, it will be easy for you even when it comes to scale, because you can be able to do the math and know, if I add 1,000 more requests, I just need to scale with this amount of CPU. So understand your application first and ensure that when you go to provision services, just read what you're provisioning. It will tell you that this VM is 1 gig of memory, 0.5 CPU, and it costs $20 a month. You'll be able to see it. So just choose what you need, what is required. Don't just provision things, haphazardly, because you might end up incurring some costs that you also don't understand. Always check after you provision a service. Always check, on what you're using. Sometimes I've seen scenarios where, due to some insecurities, some services get out of scaled, and then it adds up to the cost of running the infrastructure. So always be checking. Now, if you're building your solution and you haven't reached to a point where you have users, you don't have to be leaving the server running all the time. So you can, if you need a VM, you can boot the VM, do your experiments, do your tests, and when you're done, just shut it down. The beauty of cloud is you only pay for what you're using. You only pay for the time you're using. So it doesn't make sense to have servers running and no one is using them. Now, the advantage of something like Cloud Run is it can scale to 0, which means you deploy your application to Cloud Run, it stays idle, you're not paying for anything. But when you get a request, the application boots up and it starts running, and it provisions some resources to be able to run. So you pay for when it is running. If it's not running, it can scale to 0. So be cautious, just make sure you understand what you're provisioning, you know how much it's going to cost you. But just looking at it, it's written all over. And also if you're using credits, make sure it fits the credits that you have.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you, Sadiq, for answering some of the questions for us. Please, like Sadiq said earlier on, if you want the link, you're looking for the link for the registration and registering your team, kindly go to the chat session. The links are being posted there. You can just click on them and then fill in the forms, and then most of the things you want to find about Google Cloud, the links are there. The deck, the Google Cloud deck, the solution challenge deck, sorry, can be found in the chat session. Just go to the chat session and then you will find most of the links to what you are looking for. Yes, thank you. So, James, another question. So, can a team of three or more work collaboratively on a Google Cloud platform, or it's standalone? So, if we are in a team or we have our team for solution challenge, can all of us work on the Google Cloud platform at once, or it just has to be one person is working, or one it's just a standalone platform? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely you should be able to work in collaboration. A lot of people who use Google Cloud Platform, they work for companies, and the companies have one account, and then multiple people can be able to use that account. So you can be able to work collaboratively. Um, you can have an account, and then within the account, you can create users and invite users to that account. So the way it works is the way Google Cloud works is from a perspective of a project. So you create a project, and then you assign a billing account to that project. And the billing account could be what your credits are linked to. Now, in that project, you'll be able to provision any resources that you want, and they'll be consuming the credits, or they'll be getting billed based on that project. Now, in that project, you can now invite other people to collaborate. So you can have 2 people, 3 people, 10 people. Some companies have hundreds of users. You just need to create a project. There is something we call IAM, and with IAM, you can be able to manage uh, the access and utilization of resources within that project. And then the project is tied to a billing account, and that is where all resources get billed. Now, if by collaboration you meant in terms of working on the project, yes, that should also be possible. I believe if you're working with multiple people on the same project and everyone is writing code, you would be using version control, you'd be using Git. So obviously now you need to be able to configure a way to work together on the same Git repository. So chances are you'll have GitHub. And as you know, with GitHub, you can have any number of people contributing to the same project. So you have your GitHub project, people are contributing, people are writing code, the code goes through peer review, there are pull requests, they are merged. And now you can also connect GitHub to Google Cloud by creating a CI/CD pipeline. So, for example, if you're deploying an application to App Engine, for example, or even Cloud Run, you can configure a CI/CD pipeline from GitHub so that whenever you are working with your teammates and you reach a point where you want to deploy new version of your project, the CI/CD pipeline can deploy it for you from GitHub all the way to Google Cloud. So on GitHub, you will definitely configure GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is a way of creating workflows on GitHub where you can do any number of things when it comes to deployment. So for example, you can say whenever we merge code to the main branch, we want you to build a Docker image, push the Docker image to Google Artifact Registry, and then trigger Google Cloud Run to pull the new image. or Google Kubernetes engine to update a deployment with a new engine. That ensures that multiple people can work on that project. We just need to agree on GitHub that this is what we are deploying. And when they agree, then the configured CI/CD pipeline is able to deploy the new version of the project to your Google Cloud service.
Okay, thank you so much, James. There is one other question most people would like to know about. So the question is, how can someone become a GDE for Google Cloud? So how can I become a GDE for Google Cloud? That is a Google Developer Expert for Google Cloud. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so to become a GD for Google Cloud, I'm glad you've asked specifically for Google Cloud. So as you know, GD is usually a community role. So GDs usually have a domain expertise in a particular Google area, Google technology. So I would say you need some good understanding of Google Cloud in a way that you can be able to explain some of the services, the way they work to people. You need some experience using it because I think that's how you're able to master how it works and all the services. Then it helps if you have a good community resume. And by that I mean, before you become a GDE, you need to have done some of the things that GDEs do. So GDEs, they do a lot of community things. They speak at events, they help developers, they blog, they create content, they write. You need to have done some of those things before you become a GD. So it's twofold. You have domain expertise and you also have a community resume. So that's how I would advise you if you want to become a GD.
Okay, so thank you so much, James, for that question. I think we didn't hear how we can apply to become a GD. So how do we apply if someone wants to become a GD for Google Cloud? How do the person get to apply?
How do you apply? I don't know if the rules have changed, but I think it used to be you get contacted. I don't think there was a formal application process, but I need to find this out. I honestly don't know how to apply right now. But I think if we talked to Google, a representative of your local area, you'd be able to know.
Okay.
But when I was joining, it used to be somebody actually contacted me and asked me if I want to join. But
Okay.
it probably has changed. I'll find that out.
Okay. So Sodiq wants to help us with that. Sodiq, please.
So I understand that the application process is being revamped right now. However, I'll share a link in the chat that has all the details about the GDE. You need to be at the moment. You need to be invited by a Googler or by a Googler for you to join at the moment. So that's how it works now. Either somebody that works at Google or a GD, sorry, a Google or a GD. But that process is being revamped. So you can find all the details at any point in time for you to apply in this link that I have shared in the chat. Yes, that's where we have all the details.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Sadiq. Thank you, James, for being with us today and then helping us get answers to most of our questions. We really, really appreciate your time you spent with us here today. And I think most of us have been able to get answers to certain questions that were bothering us and raising concerns concerning Google Cloud. And we thank you for clarifying everything and making it more easier for us to use Google Cloud too. build our projects for Solution Challenge. So thank you so much, James, for being with us here today. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So, Coach Sadiq, mm,
All right.
handing over to Sadiq. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you, Shadrach, for moderating that amazing session. If you enjoyed it, please show some love to Shadrach and James by reacting. All right, I see a lot of reactions. Let me see whether we can take just one final question from somebody in the audience so that they can ask via voice before we wrap up. But definitely join us tomorrow for another session. Tomorrow we'll be deep diving into AI and ML. So you do not want to miss that. If you have anybody who is yet to sign up, please ask your leads for all the details. And you can also find all the details online to be a part of this tomorrow. Au revoir.